Sir John of Jeanville was a French knight and author of an account of the Seventh Crusade, 1248 to 1254, in which he participated under the leadership of King Louis IX of France. His account provides an insight into the events, battles, and circumstances he and his fellow knights faced during the campaign. His account describes the lavish life at court, the king's near-death experience and subsequent oath to join the crusade, the journey to the Holy Land, the battles and sieges in Egypt, including Damietta, terrible sickness in the camp, and finally the capture and release of the king and his men. He also shares anecdotes about his fellow knights, their conflicts, and his own personal experiences, ending with observations about the king's character and his eventual death in Tunisia in 1270. In his account of the Seventh Crusade, Sir John of Jeanville devotes a considerable portion to describing the opulence and power of the French court under the rule of King Louis IX. Sir John was not only a participant in the campaign, but also an eyewitness, so his descriptions of the court provide a detailed and insightful look at medieval French society. In this video, we take a look at the dark side of the Seventh Crusade, where knights fought not only for land, but also for faith, where sieges and terrible plagues tested both body and spirit. You will learn more about King Louis XIII, not only a talented warrior, but also a devout king who put his oath into action and made this war a tragic chapter in history. Join Historical Owl to discover the untold stories and mysteries of a war that not only decided the fate of a country, but also reshaped world history. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on fascinating stories from the past. The French court under King Louis IX, also known as Saint Louis, was known for its majesty, religious worship, and prosperity. Sir John describes King Louis's court as a place of absolute power, where royal ceremonies were held solemnly and regularly. King Louis IX, who was deeply religious, created a court that focused not only on politics and military, but also on faith and holiness. One of the highlights of Sir John's account is the extravagance of the banquets and feasts at court. He describes the grand banquets at King Louis's court, where exquisite dishes were served with meticulous care. These banquets were not only an opportunity to display the wealth of the court, but also an opportunity for nobles, knights, and officials to demonstrate their loyalty and respect for the king. In his account, Sir John of Jeanville describes a magnificent banquet held at Somia in 1241, which was an important event at the French court under the rule of King Louis IX. The banquet was not only a social occasion, but also demonstrated the wealth, power, and prosperity of the French court during that period. Sir John recorded in vivid detail the atmosphere of the banquet, as well as the way in which the French court displayed its status. Sir John describes that the banquet at Somia was held in a large, lavishly decorated space. The rooms were decorated with precious carpets, exquisite tables and chairs, and bright candles, creating a luxurious and solemn atmosphere. The banquet at Somia was prepared with a rich menu, reflecting the wealth of the French court. The banquet took place in a palace, where not only officials and knights, but also noble guests attended, demonstrating the court's attraction to the political and social powers of France. Sir John describes that each guest at the banquet had his own position and followed a strict order. The attendees, from knights, nobles to officials, were required to show respect and follow the rules of court etiquette. Humility, loyalty, and respect for the king were important factors in every action and word of the guests at the banquet. The banquet also had religious ceremonies, reflecting the deep faith of King Louis IX. At the banquet, guests not only ate and drank, but also participated in short prayers, and there might even be hymns sung in a solemn atmosphere, highlighting the court's devotion to God. This banquet was an important event, where King Louis IX showed his care and honor to the knights and nobles. The banquet at Somia is a clear demonstration of the wealth and power of the French court under King Louis IX. In addition to the purpose of showing off wealth, the banquet also had an important social function. It was an occasion for officials, nobles, and knights to meet, exchange information, and strengthen political and military relationships. The banquet also played an important role in maintaining and strengthening relationships between the king and his political partners, providing an opportunity for knights and officials to demonstrate their loyalty to the dynasty. A key event in Sir John's story is King Louis IX's near-death experience in a battle before the Seventh Crusade began. In 1244, as King Louis IX prepared for his military campaigns, he contracted a dangerous illness that nearly took his life. The illness was said to be severe, possibly infectious or malarial, and the king's condition worsened to the point where he was faced with imminent death. While in critical condition, King Louis IX felt the fragility of life and his dependence on God. In what seemed to be his final moments, he prayed with all his heart and dedicated himself to God. It was at this moment that King Louis IX decided to make a great oath, affirming his determination to join the crusade to retake Jerusalem from the Muslims. He promised that if he survived the illness, he would join the religious wars for the faith, leading the Crusaders in a new campaign. This oath was not only a personal commitment, but also a reflection of the king's strong faith and piety. After recovering from his critical illness, King Louis IX kept his oath. His miraculous recovery was seen as a sign of God's grace, and he felt obliged to fulfill his promise to God. He not only resolved to join the crusade, but also made careful preparations, arranging all domestic affairs and mobilizing troops for the campaign. The oath of participation in the crusade became a turning point in King Louis X's life, not only for himself, but also for French history. It was not only a commitment to fight for the faith, but also a testament to his devotion and piety. King Louis X was not only a warrior on the battlefield, but also a ruler with a deep devotion to God. This decision influenced the rest of Louis IX's reign, as he personally participated in the Seventh Crusade in 1248, with the goal of retaking Jerusalem and protecting the holy sites. Although the crusade was ultimately unsuccessful, his oath became an important part of King Louis' legacy, leading to his posthumous title of saint. In Sir John's story, King Louis IX, also known as Saint Louis's journey to the Holy Land, was an important part of the Seventh Crusade, 1248 to 1254, in which he participated, with the goal of retaking Jerusalem and the holy sites from the Muslims. The perilous journey across the Mediterranean, with its storms and difficulty in sustaining life, shows the harshness of the crusade from the beginning. Despite the many challenges they faced along the way, Sir John portrayed the journey as an opportunity for the knights to prove their faith and perseverance. King Louis IX, after taking his crusader vows in 1244, began preparations for the journey to the Holy Land. He raised a large army of some 15,000 men, including infantry, cavalry, knights, and a team of physicians, technicians, and monks to assist them during the journey. Allies were also mobilized, including other European kingdoms such as England, Hungary, and Aragon, although they did not participate in the fighting. The journey began in 1248, when King Louis IX and his army set sail from France, taking ships across the Mediterranean. They sailed through ports across the Mediterranean, heading for their ultimate goal of Egypt, where he believed that victory over the Muslims there would be a stepping stone to retaking Jerusalem. The journey was fraught with difficulties. The army encountered severe storms at sea, which made the journey long and difficult. Providing food and water for the army was also a major problem, especially during the long voyages. After a difficult journey, King Louis IX and his army finally landed in Egypt in 1249. Their initial goal was to capture the city of Damietta, an important Egyptian port that was considered a gateway to expand the Crusades inland. King Louis IX and his army began the siege of Damietta, a city defended by a large Muslim force under the command of Sultan al-Salih Ayyub. After several weeks of siege, in June 1250, King Louis IX's army finally captured Damietta, defeating the Muslims and taking control of the city. However, the capture of Damietta did not bring a decisive victory in the war, and it was also the starting point for the next difficulties of the journey. Despite the capture of Damietta, King Louis IX's army continued to face many great difficulties. One of the greatest challenges was disease. In the summer of 1250, as the army prepared to advance towards the capital Cairo, a severe epidemic, possibly cholera or malaria, struck the army camp. Thousands of soldiers and civilians died from the disease, weakening the army's morale and strength. King Louis X was not immune to illness either. He himself suffered a serious illness during this time and had to fight a life-threatening illness. Health problems, coupled with the disease and harsh fighting conditions, prevented his army from continuing its journey as planned. After capturing Damietta, King Louis IX and his army continued inland, aiming to advance towards the capital Cairo. However, the French army was stopped and besieged by the Muslim forces of Sultan al-Salih Ayyub in a fierce battle. While the French continued to wage a long siege, the lack of food, water, and reinforcements gradually weakened their fighting strength. In April 1250, the French were forced to retreat when they were heavily attacked by the Muslims, leading to their defeat at Al-Mansura near the Nile. In this battle, King Louis IX and his army were surrounded, and the situation became desperate. After the defeat at Al-Mansura, King Louis IX and the rest of his army were captured by the Muslims. King Louis IX was taken prisoner, and his Seventh Crusade was in danger of complete failure. However, a prisoner exchange was concluded, and King Louis IX and his army were subsequently released in 1254. King Louis X had to pay a large ransom to free himself and his knights from captivity. In his memoirs, Sir John not only recounts the main events of the Seventh Crusade, but also shares many interesting anecdotes about his fellow knights and the conflicts between them. These stories enrich the picture of life in the army of King Louis X and reflect the complex relationships and challenges that the knights faced during the journey. Sir John recounts the tense moments when the knights fought together and defended their honor. One of the most prominent anecdotes is about a knight named Geoffrey de Villehardouin, who was known for his courage and absolute loyalty. In a fierce battle, Geoffrey stood up to protect a wounded comrade, despite the danger, and defeated a group of enemy cavalry. This story not only shows courage, but also emphasizes the deep friendship between the knights and the army. The anecdotes of the knights and conflicts told by Sir John of Jeanville not only illuminate the personalities and relationships between the characters of the Crusades, but also reflect on the trials, conflicts, and sacrifices of war. Finally, Sir John concludes his story with insightful observations on the character of King Louis IX. He portrays King Louis as a devout leader, devoted to the gods, who always put the interests of his army and people before himself. However, Sir John also emphasizes the king's personal sacrifice in harsh circumstances and his perseverance in continuing to fulfill his religious duties. Sir John also witnesses the death of King Louis in 1270 in Tunisia during another crusade campaign, where King Louis died of illness. Sir John's story is not only a record of the war and the brutality of the Crusades, but also reflects the spiritual, moral, and spiritual values of the participants in the campaign, especially through the lens of King Louis IX. Sir John's account provides a clear view of life during the Crusades, from the luxury of the royal court to the hardships of the battlefield and the camp. And so we have together explored a dramatic and tragic part of the Seventh Crusade, with its exploits, terrible challenges, and the story of King Louis IX, a king who was not only a brave warrior, but also a symbol of steadfast faith. Sir John of Jeanville has left us a vivid picture of this journey, with battles, illnesses, and difficult decisions. Although this crusade was not successful, it contributed to reshaping history, leaving a deep mark on both the journey of faith and power. If you find this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to Historical Owl and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. We will continue to explore historical treasures, classic battles, and characters that changed the course of the world. Leave a comment below the video, sharing your thoughts on the Seventh Crusade and King Louis IX. Let's explore the untold stories together, because history always contains interesting secrets that only passionate explorers like you